Hi, Chris. We just came away from Secretary Clinton's speech. What did you hear today? What do you think changed?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, there was a lot of subtlety in what she said. What I think was really, a positive thing was using the words internet freedom and introducing that, into public discourse. Of course, having access to the web and net and so on is of course kind of appreciated, but the fact that it's connected now to freedom, I think is very interesting. And the idea of the freedom to connect is also something that I hadn't really heard before. And I've been doing a lot of work lately, in the social web, and of course trying to work on interoperability between networks. And this notion of connecting is very central to that whole premise. So if the idea of the freedom to connect is aligned with the freedom of assembly, then that means that there's actually a lot of historic precedent for the cross-pollination of networks. And I think that's something that's very important. One of the things that they didn't address, of course, and maybe it gets into the weeds a little bit, is around how you decentralize a lot of this activity. Of course, it's very easy for countries like Iran and China to block Facebook or block Twitter because all the activity is amalgamated into these central spaces. The question becomes, how can either the State Department or the design of these technologies help to actually embrace the nature of the design of the internet to decentralize this activity so that it's harder to suppress and actually just sort of federates freedom to a wider constituency. And that, of course, probably is further down the road, but needs to be thought of. The other thing that I'd like to hear more about is how we can speed up maybe a culture of innovation so that we can actually move faster than the desire to suppress. It's easier to shut things down than to build things that are new, and hopefully some of the grants that were mentioned today, some of the support that the State Department wants to provide would help, move things in that direction.
Now that occasioned a lot of interest, the idea that the State Department would, for instance, fund a mobile app which would allow citizens to rate government agencies and to ferret out corruption, as she said.
Right.
One crucial tension appears to be, though, this issue of anonymity. That's a question that came up, and how the really tricky issue of intermediary liability comes up, which is now a real issue in Europe. We're seeing the tension here in the U.S. and China in those terms, but there are governments there that are also approaching this in a different way. What are some of the ways that you see the private sector developing tools in concert with NGOs and government agencies to help do that?
Well, it's funny that you should ask. This is, again, a little bit of the weeds, but the plumbing is also important in terms of how this gets built out. But I'm, of course, a board member of the OpenID Foundation, and just last night we voted to move forward with what we're calling the OpenID Exchange. And for those of you who don't know, OpenID is, of course, a technology that allows you to take an account that you have in one place and use it elsewhere, and essentially creates kind of an identity framework for the web that works in the way that the web does. What we've done and what we've been doing in concert with the federal government actually in the last 6 to 8 months is trying to come up with a scheme that allows us to create a certification process for what are called identity providers. So in so much as now there are organizations that are willing to actually become your internet sort of identity provider, there is now going to be a process in place, hopefully, if all goes according to plan, that will certify that identity provider so that should things go wrong or should you need some extra protections and so on, there's actually an organization that's looking out for that infrastructure. And that, I think, is going to be an interesting change in the value of an identity online and where you can use and take that identity with you when you transact both business, commerce, but also communication. So we're at the very, very early stages of that. And one thing that I'm hopeful about is just that this technology is built sort of out of an open source grassroots community, and it's designed in such a way that, again, inherits from the design of the internet, in that it's fully supports decentralization, fully supports anonymity when it's necessary, but also, which is different from before, provides you the opportunity to not be anonymous if you choose not to be. And I think over time, as Facebook has proven, there is a great deal of value that comes from being able to actually say who you are and have someone vouch for that, and then act accordingly.
Well, thanks again, Chris. I appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks.